Have any of you noticed how things that are considered bad in mainstream morality, or at least the morality of older people and more Puritan people, those same things that are considered bad are also considered cool by other people? I've noticed this a lot in my own life, during my childhood and my early adulthood, and after doing some research on the topic, it seems like it's been going on for a while now, especially in certain areas like music. I mean, you can go all the way back to the early days of jazz in America, over 100 years ago at this point, where a lot of people considered jazz to be bad because, the gals would go dancing, maybe have a couple of drinks, and God forbid that they're dancing and, getting wild with a black jazz musician. Obviously, anything that's making white women dance with black guys in the 1920s, that's bad. We gotta ban that, we gotta shut it down, we gotta make it illegal. Now, maybe that example is just due to racism. I mean, it pretty obviously is. But let's fast forward a few decades to Elvis. Okay, so Elvis was a white guy, so obviously he didn't have the racial bias against him. Although he did bite the styles of some black artists that came before him, like Chuck Berry. So that might have influenced some of the outrage against him. But the main thing that people were concerned about with Elvis mostly had to do with the way that he moved when he was on stage, right? So Elvis did this thing. He was one of the first, well, not the first, obviously Chuck Berry was doing this, but he was one of the first people that I guess white people really knew about that would like shake his hips a lot, right? So he did this thing where he'd shake his hips and he'd basically be humping the air while he's dancing on stage. And old people got outraged by that because their daughters would go to watch these shows, and I guess they were upset that Elvis, humping the air was making their daughters horny, and can't have that, right? Can't have teen girls and girls in their 20s getting horny. That's bad in America, especially back then in the 50s. So people tried to boycott Elvis and say that he was making the devil's music and all this nonsense, but all that really did was make him more popular. There's the old saying that any press is good press, even bad press. And music is one of the places where that's the most true. Okay, and there's numerous examples if you go through the decades of bad press actually causing artists to sell more albums, more records, more concert tickets, more merchandise. Same thing with Kiss, right? So you take Kiss, you got these guys that were dressing in leather and with spikes on it and everything like that, and they paint their faces and they'd be sticking their tongue out and making rock and roll music. Okay, again, old people considered it the devil music, and they would try to ban it. They would try to keep Kiss from going to their shows. They would try to, keep their kids from listening to Kiss. And what did this do? It made it cool. Okay, it made it like this underground thing where you had to keep it a secret that you liked Kiss. Kids would trade, I don't know if they had CDs back then. They definitely had cassettes though. So they would trade like Kiss cassettes with one another, trying to keep it all low key, and it would do like this little underground railroad type deal with Kiss music. And again, all it does is make it more and more popular. Okay, Marilyn Manson, another good example. So, you have this guy who's dressing up in like these anthropomorphic costumes. It's he kind of looks like a girl, kind of looks like a guy. You can't really tell. He's singing literal satanic music, and people want to ban him, right? You had the religious folks that would get all up in arms. They would try to have these church lock-ins on the same days that Marilyn Manson would be coming to town, try to keep the kids from going to it. All it did was make the kids like Marilyn Manson that much more. So trying to boycott music, trying to say that music is bad, all it does is make it more popular. Now, I've seen this happen in my own life. Okay, obviously I wasn't, I'm not that old where I was around when Manson was really popular, but I was around when GUnit started getting popular. And this is the first example that I noticed of this. So GUnit was not necessarily one of the first groups, but when I was a kid, they were one of the groups that kind of made rap more mainstream, right? They weren't like NWA, where they were talking about a lot of political stuff and sort of like bashing cops and bashing whitey. There's some of that, right? You got some music's like some songs like Ghetto Quran, but most of GUnit stuff was just talking about mainstream rap stuff. Okay, so you got, look at me, I'm a gangster guy in my flashy car. Look at all this jewelry I got. Look at all this money I got, and I sell drugs and I shoot guns and blah blah blah. Okay, not racially biased or anything like that. And the white kids, who a few years previous, at least in my community, didn't really hang out with black guys, and not to say that they were racist or anything. I mean, it was maybe, and I did live in the South, so maybe there was a little bit of that influence going on with their parents, but the white kids themselves weren't racist. They just didn't really hang out with black guys. But then all of a sudden, GUnit comes along, and it's all black guys, and they're the cool guys. They're the guys you see on MTV. They're the guys that everybody's talking about. Now all of a sudden, these white kids want to have black friends. Now all of a sudden, these white kids want to start dressing like black dudes, which back then, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, the style that meant was you basically wore really baggy clothes, like you wore a shirt that would like come down past where your crotch is, and you wear these really baggy jeans. And for some people it made sense, right? Like if you're a person living in the hood, committing illegal activities, if you wear baggy clothes, it's a lot easier to conceal a firearm. So it actually makes sense, right? That's your uniform. It kind of goes with the work. But if you're some suburban white kid who's just buying like Abercrombie and Fitch, or you're buying, like if you're poor, you're buying some clothes at Walmart, and you're just getting them a size larger. Not even like a hand-me-down or anything like that where you're wearing your big brother stuff. You're literally just getting a size that's above what your size actually is. And going to school dressed like that, and wearing the hat where it's like cocked to the side, kind of. Just doing all of that to try to fit in, right? To try to be like a black kid. And their parents obviously didn't like this, okay? Again, some of the parents might have actually been racist. I don't know. I don't care. I'm not even going to get into that. But a lot of them probably just saw the fact that there's these black guys that are basically glorifying a gangster lifestyle in their music, right? They're talking about how they sold a bunch of drugs and got money, or they're pimping girls and getting money. And they don't want their kids to go down that path, right? We don't want little Johnny, who used to play Little League Baseball and was a good church boy, listening to the GUnit and going out and doing some criminal activity. So they would try to ban it. Okay, they would try to restrict it. You've got these parental advisory stickers that they started slapping on. I mean, that came before GUnit, but obviously it got slapped on their stuff as well. And the parents would try to restrict it. And again, all this did was make it more popular. You had more kids that wanted to jump on it. Okay, you had kids that were maybe just into it a little bit, right? Maybe they just listened to one or two 50-cent songs, and they're like, oh, this is kind of okay. But then their parents catch them, and they're like, no, you can't listen to that. Now all of a sudden they're listening to everybody in GUnit, right? They're listening to The Game. They're listening to Tony Ayo. They're even listening to Lloyd Banks because their parents had this outrage against something that they were kind of into, and then that made it cool. Another example that I experienced in my life was with weed, right? With marijuana. So marijuana in America has been illegal forever, okay? Like it goes all the way back to the 1920s, which again, main reason that it was originally made illegal is because the black jazz musicians would smoke the weeds, and then if they shared a joint with some white girl, she'd get high, and then she'd end up fucking a black guy. And obviously, if you're a white woman fucking a black guy in 1920s America, there's nothing worse than that. That's like crucifying baby Jesus in 1920s America. So you gotta ban weed. And then we still have it banned in a lot of places. I mean, here in Massachusetts, it's legal, but like where I used to live in Georgia, it's still super illegal. Okay, if you get pulled over by a cop in Georgia and you have like a blunt in your car, not even like weed where you could sell it, just like a half smoked joint or whatever, you go into jail. Okay, so you take weed, something which is arguably bad, and you know I kind of think it is bad, right? Any type of drug use that you're gonna do where it's a vice, okay, whether it's weed, whether it's alcohol, whatever, it's probably best if you didn't do anything. Okay, like probably like if we're gonna be honest with ourselves, the best way to probably be is like a Mormon, right? They don't even do caffeine. They don't do any drugs at all. And look at them. They're all a bunch of happy, smiley fucks with 10 wives. Not really 10 wives. In fact, I think that they disavowed that. Maybe they'll smile a little less because they don't have the polygamy going on. But anyway, getting off track here. Weed. So obviously where I lived growing up, it was bad. Okay, it was illegal. But when the kids started getting into it, they thought it was cool, right? You smoke this thing, you get high, and da 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 da. I was exposed to it at a very early age. I think I was like 14 or something like that. And you know, with me being a black guy, you can get weed for a lot less than white people can, and you just have more access to it. I mean, it's just you know, people want to talk about how there's no perks to being black. That's one of them. You get discounts on weed and other drugs. So when I was in high school and when I was in middle school, I was a nerd. Okay, like literally all of my friends that I had in middle school we were just a bunch of nerds that got straight A's and played RuneScape, and that's like all we ever talked about was, oh, you know, are you working on this test for school? And oh man, we're gonna go play RuneScape and level our fishing level. Like that's what I was into. But if you go to high school, that's not going to get girls interested in you. That's not going to get you invited to a party if you're playing RuneScape. So weed actually ended up being a pathway for me to become, I guess, a cool kid in high school. Okay, I literally started like dealing pot in high school and started selling it to girls, started selling it to like the chads of the school. And then all of a sudden, I have these girls who want to hang out with me. I'm getting invited to these parties. I'm going to do all of this cool stuff. And meanwhile, everybody's having this outrage against pot. They don't like it. They want to ban it. There are even kids in my class that got arrested for it, right? Got arrested, went to juvie, all that type of stuff. Did it stop anybody from doing pot? Nope. It just made it cooler. It just made it more popular because all of the adults are having this blind outrage, this overreaction, because even though I don't think it's really good for you to do drugs, I still think they should all be legal. Okay, I think if you're an adult and you should just be able to make your own decisions. Okay, I can't wrap my head around how something like Coca-Cola, which will literally kill you faster than pot. It'll probably even kill you faster than alcohol. Okay, drink a Coke every single day for a year, and then compare that to smoking a joint every single day or drinking a beer every single day. You're going to be way worse off drinking that Coke. And that's something that we let little kids buy in the store. It's way worse for you. And then, but again, people just have this blind outrage for it, and it makes it cooler. So another one that I've noticed, and this happened more recently in my life. Like this is something that you can pretty much trace back to probably the past 10 years, is like homosexuality, the whole LGBT thing, right? When I was growing up, that was not cool at all. Like if somebody even thought you were gay, you would be this social outcast, like nobody would mess with you. Trans, I don't think we really had any trans kids. There was one trans kid that went to my church, but I didn't have any in my school, and she was a lot older, but she was pretty cool. I mean, we went and played basketball and football and stuff with her. Him, I don't know. I don't understand the whole how you're supposed to call people when they identify. I mean, you got to explain it to me. You can't just expect me to know. But that was considered really, really bad. And people had all this blind outrage towards it. Okay, you can go back and look at all the political debates that people had about it. trying to say that, oh, marriage has to be between a man and a woman, and you're not allowed to be gay, and if we start marrying men to men, all of a sudden people are going to want to marry their toasters and their horses, and all this silly crap. Okay, so there was a whole lot of blind outrage against gays in the LGBTQ whatever community. Now look at where it is. Okay, now, granted, I'm in a different geographic spot, but like if you walk around in Massachusetts, there's all types of like pride flags and support pride. You've got Pride Month, okay, June, which is arguably one of the best months to have, right? I mean, that's kind of interesting how that works. How, Black History Month, you get the shortest month of the year, and it's also one of the crappier months because it's in the winter time. But Pride Month is right smack in June, one of the longer months of the year, right in the summer. Interesting how that works. But now it's cool. And now I'm starting to notice this phenomenon where, there's kids who aren't even really gay. And before you go and start calling me a bigot or whatever, okay, I acknowledge that there are people that are born gay. Okay, there is certain, maybe 2 or 3% of the population, because it even occurs in animals in that same frequency. Okay, so if there's going to be gay lions, if there's going to be gay monkeys, obviously there's going to be gay humans, and that's natural to some degree. But there's a lot of people that I have noticed are pretending to be gay or trying to make themselves be gay just for the fact that it's trendy now. Okay, now it's popular. Now if you're gay, everybody wants to be, or not everybody, right? You still got religious people who aren't really down with it. But you've got a lot of people who want to be your friend. They want to hang out with you. They want to support you. You can get scholarships for it. You can get like in IT, for example, not just IT, but like coding, tech in general. It seems like there's a lot of people now who are either gay, trans, what's the other thing that they do? Furries. Like all of that now is super popular. And I can't help but think the reason why it's so popular is because people spent years and years, decades and decades bashing these people, trying to hold them down, trying to say that it's bad with all this blind outrage and no really logical arguments against it. And now people are gravitating towards it. So what's the point? Okay, what's the point of this whole thing where I'm pointing out the obvious? Well, I think that if you really want someone to not do something, okay, if you're a parent or if you've got, like I've got a nephew, okay, so there's certain things that I obviously don't want him to do. I don't want him to do drugs, okay? I don't want him to act like some knucklehead thug, but I'm not going to have a blind outrage towards it if he gravitates towards these things, okay? Kids are smarter than you might think they are, especially in this day and age where kids have access to the internet. Like that's one thing that I really wish the adults in my life when I was growing up realized, is that I was a kid who knew how to use the internet. If you compare me to an adult at the time who doesn't know how to use the internet, I'm pretty much on par with you as far as intelligence goes. Okay, there's certain things that you know better that only come from wisdom, only come from experience. But in terms of like just cold, hard logic, like, one of the things with pot that they tried to tell me was that it was a gateway drug. If you do pot, then you're going to want to do heroin. That was one Google search away, and I was able to falsify it. Okay, all this nonsense that they tried to tell me, I can't think of them now, but there's all this just bullcrap that adults try to tell me about pot to make it seem bad. And one Google search away, I figured out that it wasn't. And then I was like, hey, you know what? These adults don't know what they're talking about. They're lying to me. I'm going to go ahead and do it. When what they could have done is they could have just sat me down and talk to me like an adult, talk to me like a man, and be like, hey, here's why you probably shouldn't do pot. Okay, obviously you're inhaling smoke into your lungs. Okay, you're interested in being athletic, you're interested in being fit or whatever. That's going to put a dampener on it. Okay, here's another thing. A lot of jobs, they drug test. Okay, that's just the reality of the situation. And pot is the worst drug to do if you need to pass a drug test, because that shit stays in your system for up to 4 or 5 weeks, if you're getting the piss test. And if you're getting the hair follicle test, then you're really screwed. It's like 90 days that they can detect it in your hair. So that's a reason not to do it. Okay. Another reason not to do it is it affects your motivation. It affects your drive. All right. There's no, and again, people are going to say, oh, what about Snoop Dogg and Doug Benson and all these successful potheads and Joe Rogan? He's so successful. Yeah, okay. All right. You can list off 3 or 4 people. For every 3 or 4 potheads that you can point out to who are successful and rich, there's thousands of them that are on welfare, sitting on the couch, eating Doritos. Okay? It's not something to do if you're trying to be successful and you're trying to have a drive to achieve things in your life. So if somebody would have just sat down and told me that honestly, I probably wouldn't have gotten into it when I was a kid. Okay, and if I didn't get into it as a kid, I might have never even gotten into it at all, right? I could have been like these kids that, actually listened to Nancy Reagan and didn't do drugs. Same thing goes for being a thug, okay? Just explain to the kids, like, look, these guys who act like thugs, who sell drugs, who pimp women, who steal cars, who do all of this criminal shit, that life is short-lived, okay? They end up dead or in jail within a couple of years, and you could show them examples of it. You could have taken me down to the prison. Okay, thank goodness I didn't really get into the whole like gangster knucklehead thing too much, but you could have just taken him down to the prison like they do in Scared Straight now and be like, look, talk to this guy, right? You want to be a Crip? That guy was in the Crips, all right? Ask him how it went for him. You want to be a Blood? That guy was a Blood. Ask him how it went for him. Okay, same thing when it comes to sex. Okay, premarital sex, underage, all that type of crap. It's not good. Okay, it's not great. A lot of people end up pregnant. And that's one of the worst things that you can do to your life is you end up having a kid out of wedlock, because holy cow, if you're that's a really hard hole to dig yourself out of. And you can just sit kids down and explain that to them. Okay, don't make up some nonsense that you're gonna go to hell or try to say that they're gonna get some type of horrible STD. That could happen, but the main thing to be careful about is getting pregnant when you're a kid. Just be honest with them. Okay, just explain that to them. Don't make it bad. Okay, or at least don't make it blindly bad, because all that making something bad does is make it cool to other people.